afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this June meeting of the Sustainable Development Committee. I hope you can all hear me. Of course, our meeting is being conducted through the Microsoft Teams platform. And just ask you if you could turn off your microphones and cameras. And before we begin, I'd like to ask Councillor Carl McLean to lead us in prayer, please. Carl.
Lord our God, we come again into your presence, asking that you would be with us in our deliberations over this meeting. We ask, O Lord, that you would give us wisdom and give us the needed knowledge to conduct our business correctly. We give thanks for the opportunity of meeting, but we realize that we have but delegated authority, and that all authority comes from you, the giver of life. We ask that you would bless the chair and all connected with this meeting, and bless them as they conduct this meeting. Remember our Chief Executive and all his officers at this time. We thank you for the work that they have been doing over the past months and year. We ask that you would be with them in all that they do. Remember our communities, especially those who are affected through this pandemic that we have been experiencing. We ask that you would help them, those who are ill, who cannot get the help that they need at this time. Maybe we're expecting to go through some procedure or other, but cannot because of the hold-up there is. We ask that you would be with them and help them. Be with our aged population as well. We ask that these times are difficult for them, that you would help them. And remember especially those that mourn. I think particularly of the Ferguson family in Gress. We ask that you would come near to them in what we would call the untimely death of their son. Oh Lord, we ask that you would remember them in particular, and remember the MacLeod family as well, that are mourning the loss of an infant. Lord, these are mysteries to us, that we have to confess and acknowledge that it is all done in your will, and whatever comes of it. We ask that you would help us then to be reconciled to that will. Be with us all, we pray. Bless our nation and generation at this time. Return to us, as we heard already today, with the days of reviving, that we would see our great need of turning again to the one who offers us life, who offers us peace. We ask that we would return to the one who holds out his arms to us, Jesus, who says, if any man thirst, if any woman thirst, let him come to me and drink. Bless us then and keep us. We ask all for Jesus' sake. Amen.
Thank you, Councillor McLean. Before we go into the usual points of conduct of the meeting, I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome Dave McLennan and Stephen Livermore from Fraser Nash Consultancy, who are with us today to present on the Outer Hebrides Energy Hub feasibility study, and I would suggest we take this item first on the agenda. Just a few reminders of the usual housekeeping rules before we proceed. Please ensure your camera and microphone are off. This assists with broadband connectivity and also prevents background noise. I will call on the relevant officer to present their report. If a member or officer wishes to ask a question or raise a point, please do so using the raise your hand function on your device. I will invite each member in the queue to speak, and at that point please switch your mic and camera on. After you have spoken, please ensure that you lower your hand and put your mic and camera off. Your device should be positioned so that your image is clear and that other participants, and please speak clearly and concisely directly at the camera. When calling for agreement of recommendations at each of item, a no show of hands, raised hands, a no show of hands will be taken as indication of the committee's approval. How many times have I read this before and I still can't get it right? Sorry. In terms of our declarations of interest, members are reminded of the protocol. You must leave the meeting at ending the call, which will be confirmed by the moderator and the chair. And following consideration of the item, you will be invited back into the meeting by the moderator. Please ensure you are available to accept the invitation to rejoin. Final reminder, the meeting has been live streamed and recorded. recording will be made available on the coroner's website following the meeting. And before we do move on to the agenda items, just some positive news to report. In regard to the Strategic Tourism Infrastructure Fund, I'm pleased to announce that the coroner has secured funding along with 5 other areas as part of the pilot development plan proposal to be submitted to the Scottish Government by January 2022. This funding will help the coroner develop a Vista infrastructure plan to better inform the requirements for key infrastructure funding over the next 2 to 3 years. The coroner will work closely with communities to identify how infrastructure provision can be enhanced in a way that improves outcomes for visitors, local residents and the environment. So that's some positive news to start the meeting. We will now move to the presentation at item 3, and before I hand over to David and Stephen for the presentation, I'll ask John Cowan to introduce the concurrent report to the item. David and Stephen will then lead us through the key findings of the feasibility study and answer any questions. So it's over to you first, John.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, the Outer Hebrides Energy Hub at Arnish. David and Stephen are with us to present the outcome of their report. And basically, we're looking at the feasibility of a green hydrogen production, storage and distribution hub at Arnish, driven principally by the conversion of the Stornoway gas network to 100% hydrogen by SGN. So I think David and Stephen have all the details. I'll just hand over to them and they'll be able to answer any questions afterwards, and I can come in if necessary, Chair. Thanks.
Very good, thank you. Welcome, David and Stephen.
Hello. I'll just get my camera on there. Hello, and yes, and thank you first of all for the opportunity to invite us here today and talk to you about this project. Thank you for the introduction as well, John. My name is David McLennan, and I've been the project manager for this study delivered by Fraser Nash. I'll also introduce my colleague on the call, Stephen Livermore, who is the technical lead for this project. We have, I believe, 10 minutes to provide quite a high-level overview of the project here, and I've got a few slides that I'll pull up to support that. While I'm just pulling that up, so you can see that now. Is that coming through? I've been having some gremlins with my Teams recently. So.
Yeah, yes.
Excellent. So yeah, in terms of a structure, we'll very quickly recap some of the background and drivers of the project, just for some introduction really to it, before going through into the objectives of the project, explaining the approach that we've taken in its delivery, and then finally we'll kind of pull out some of the key findings that we've taken from the study. I believe there's a Q&A session at the end of this. Because I've got a slide in front of me, I don't always see the hands, so if I can ask that we should keep the questions until then, Stephen and I will do our best to answer them. So, as I'm sure you're all aware, the Outer Hebrides have an abundant wind energy resource, and are also currently heavily dependent on the import of fuels, and this results in some of the highest energy usage cost in the UK. The proposed new interconnector, or the lack of, and the delay of its development has probably constrained some of the potential wind farm development opportunity, limiting the capacity to export this power. And I guess interestingly as well, through the course of this project, we saw damage to the existing interconnector, and we've probably all seen the disruption that's caused. So that's kind of highlighting a resilience issue as well. So I guess also with the backdrop of net zero, the islands, Scotland and the UK more generally, to kind of unlock this potential, hydrogen is seen as a very attractive energy vector. And it's been subject to quite a lot of development recently, effectively because its usage byproduct is water. So there's been some work done before Fraser Nash have been involved, but a 100% green hydrogen hub has been the focus of the study that will use the abundant wind resource available. Effectively, that gets used to produce electricity. This electricity can then be used to convert water, H2O, into its component parts of hydrogen and oxygen. The hydrogen can then be stored and used as a fuel alternative to fossil fuels. And as I say, the byproduct being effectively water. So it's a really exciting project that we're keen to get involved with the potential of decarbonising the Stornoway gas network, converting it from its current LPG fuel to hydrogen. The potential to unlock and utilise some of this wind potential through both onshore and offshore potential schemes and projects. It has the potential to have complementary offerings into the deep water port, exploiting ferry refueling and maybe export potential as well. And then also bringing new jobs and R&D opportunities to the local economy. So yeah, really exciting project, and as I say, one we were very happy to be involved with. So in terms of kind of high level objectives, as I say, we recognise there's been some work on hydrogen already been done prior to this project. So really to say what we've done here, there were two main outputs that we focused on. First was a technical feasibility study, and the second was a report that was used to support the Eilean Steel business case. So, and you can see here from the slide, this is a kind of a diagram taken from the feasibility study that illustrates what a potential hydrogen hub may look like in its component parts. So you've got electricity supplied from either onshore or offshore wind that feeds an electrolyzer, which converts the water into the two oxygen and hydrogen components. It can also have a backup grid connection, and then that hydrogen, the production of hydrogen, can be stored and then piped onto the network or tube trailer transported to off-grid areas of demand. So to assess the sort of technical feasibility study of this, we've kind of posed some key questions. First of all, is there a credible demand? So can the hydrogen that's produced and supplied, where can that feasibly be used? Stornoway gas network being the key driver for this project, but also vehicles, industrial applications, use of ferries, and export potential. So secondly, is there a suitable commercially available technology to actually deliver this? And that considers both in the production side, in terms of the electrolyzers, are they available at the moment, and storage solutions, but also end use cases in terms of where that hydrogen can be consumed. So thinking domestic properties, domestic applications, boilers, cookers, in the vehicles, fuel cell vehicles, heavy goods vehicles, that sort of challenge. And then finally, we also considered what the hydrogen hub would look like in terms of its creation and operation. So what kind of project would be required, and what kind of project approach should be taken in its design, its construction, but also the longer term operation and long term maintenance and management of that facility. Secondly, the input into the business case, it was really to provide some support into that, and to do that we carried out an economic assessment of the hydrogen production, so considering the costs of producing the hydrogen and comparing these against existing costs relating to fossil fuel, and it also considered the wider economic benefits that could be realised through the hydrogen hub, such as kind of job creation and gross value add for the islands. So in terms of an approach, as a first step, we went through an energy audit of the island. So we looked at the types of energy being used on the island, how it's being used, and where that's being supplied from. As there's no specific design for what a hydrogen hub is at this stage, we tried to frame this problem using 3 high-level scenarios, and this helped to sort of bound and frame the production and demand requirements of each of these. So the first scenario is probably a base case scenario of just converting the Stornoway gas network. The second expands that out to include transport with fuel cell commercial vehicles, some use of council buildings, and some smaller ferries as well. And then the third scenario was a much bigger, larger, more ambitious plan that would look to fuel all ferries, explore export markets, and a much larger production volume of hydrogen in comparison to just the gas network alone. So for each of these scenarios, we looked at the total cost of ownership, which considers both the capital costs involved with getting that project off the ground, but also the longer term operational costs that ultimately drive the cost of hydrogen, and that's used to understand what in our economic analysis, what is the final cost of hydrogen, how does that compare to fossil fuels. So we also, based on those 3 scenarios, we carried out some calculations to understand the sort of plant sizing requirements in terms of the production, the hydrogen production through electrolyzers, and the scale of wind farm that would be required to supply the load demand of those electrolyzers. And then the final bullet point there, which is based on these plant sizing requirements and storage requirements, what kind of technology is there? So a technology assessment of the key pieces of equipment, and again, that's considering both production but also the end use appliances in residential houses and hydrogen fuel cell vehicles as well. So just to summarize, and it is a very quick run through this, I'm afraid, but some key findings. What did we conclude from this study? Fundamentally, there are credible sources of demand that can be used on the Outer Hebrides. The Stornoway gas network with SGN is maybe the most obvious. It creates an instant demand, but then buses and municipal vehicles, they're already in practice up in Aberdeen and also in Glasgow. This is already being invested in, so these are very tangible and not very achievable. So in addition to that, I think there's also feasible scope for exporting potential, and other industrial applications, and also the fueling of marine, such as ferries. And then I think, interestingly, it was announced a couple of weeks ago, the High Seas 3 project in Orkney, where they are looking to develop a passenger ferry, and using fuel cells with an electrical drive system. And so there's precedent there to look at hydrogen, and that could potentially also be used for the delivery of a freight ferry for further developed down the line, which would be of benefit to the island, I'm sure. Second point there, there's existing technology. That is the kind of conclusion. It's available there at the moment to develop the hydrogen hub. You could arguably go and construct one at the moment. In terms of the load supply that's required, there's easily sufficient renewable potential from onshore and offshore electrolyzer offshore sources that could be used to supply these electrolyzers for any of the 3 scenarios. So wind farm developments through potentially Scotland, even that could be fed in quite comfortably, meet the demand scenario of scenario 3. One thing that we did identify that needs further consideration during the design stages is to do with the sort of the plant sizing. So in terms of the output of hydrogen from the electrolyzer and the amount of storage that's required, that needs to be balanced against the level of redundancy and resilience of the system to meet the final hydrogen demand across the islands. So, you know, an example of this is the current SGN reserves that are held are quite large, and that's potentially just to compensate for the transportation risk of not being able to get the LPG back onto the island. So local hydrogen production potentially de-risks that, but you also need to consider the sort of redundancy and resilience within that hydrogen system to ensure once it becomes a fuel, it needs to be a sort of critical piece of infrastructure. So we can, third point there, and it's maybe not a huge surprise, but the hydrogen will be more expensive than current fossil fuels. So this means that it will require some subsidies or higher costs placed on carbon emissions. This is ultimately always going to be the case for any kind of green energy solution. It is just more expensive. But there is movements in policy, and I guess we all wait to see what the outcome of the upcoming COP26 is. But yes, it's not necessarily a surprising outcome of the study. And the UK government's hydrogen strategy will also be published this summer, and it will be interesting to see what hydrogen will what place hydrogen will take and how they get around this problem, because the cost of hydrogen is not an isolated instance for the Outer Hebrides. It's countrywide, and it doesn't necessarily only apply to hydrogen as well. It's all green alternatives. They all come with a cost. So considered how the hydrogen hub could be designed and constructed, as I say, the long-term operation maintenance as well. And this has kind of been considered with the view of doing this through a joint venture, and that would be responsible for the creation in terms of the design and development and the production and ownership of the final assets. The scale of this is the project will be quite considerable, and you know does present some risk, and we recommended a sort of stage gate approach to fully understand the requirements, refine the design, and determine the required specification that would meet the requirements of the Outer Hebrides, both short and long-term ambitions, I guess. And then finally, based on the technology review of hydrogen technology, once the hydrogen hub is created, it's you know it's quite likely that this will be easily replicated throughout the islands. The technology is there. It's modular. It's scalable, particularly with green hydrogen as an alternative to blue hydrogen. It's very scalable. It's very modular, especially once you've got a local demand for that hydrogen. This could very easily be scaled across the islands in more rural areas. So yes, as I say, that was a kind of a very quick fly through, and hopefully that's been of some use. I can perhaps just open that out to questions. I don't know if that covers it.
That was excellent. Thanks very much. We'll open it up now to some questions from members. Councillor John Mitchell.
Oh, hi there. Not a member of your committee, Chair. I have to admit that I was a chemistry teacher in my previous life, although that was about 10 years ago. So I do share your excitement in the hydrogen fuel economy being such a clean, zero carbon fuel. I've got three questions that I remember posing some years ago when I was still at the whiteboard face, so to speak. Number one, you mentioned in terms of technical feasibility, one of the issues before was the difficulty in storage compared to LPG, which is propane. the difficulty in storing and liquefying such a small gas as hydrogen had a number of technological issues. That was my first thing, to ask, how is that progressing? And number two, you talk about the possibility of commercial and or domestic use. How far are we along the road in terms of feasibility of conversion? Because most hotels and on my own house here is powered by LPG in terms of cooking facilities. How easy, how expensive is it in order to convert it from LPG use to hydrogen use? And my third question is, you talk about, and we fully expect any green energy is going to be more expensive. Are you in a position to give us a factor of how much more expensive it is compared to normal fossil fuels? Thank you, and a good report, by the way. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thanks, John. David, Stephen, 3 questions.
Do you want me to say that, David?
Yeah, you feel free to.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much for those questions. So just taking them in turn. So on the storage side, David mentioned there in his presentation that we did identify hydrogen storage as a technology challenge in the study. As you mentioned, there is a large amount of current resilience in the LPG system. If you have the same amount of resilience in terms of energy content in hydrogen as you've got in LPG, the energy density of hydrogen is better. So in terms of mass, you don't need as much, but it is it's not very dense. So you do need a very large volume of it. We looked at different solutions for that. In the study, we assumed that it's going to be low pressure storage because that's the safest. And if you, based on that assumption, it would take up a very large area. However, there are things that can be done in terms of, as David mentioned there, in terms of adding resilience through the plant. So resilience at the moment is there because in terms of LPG, because the transportation risks, if the LPG can't be brought across the ferry, but if we're actually manufacturing the hydrogen on the islands, then that transportation risk goes away. So it's all about what happens to equipment if the wind's blowing, and that can be dealt with to some extent by redundancy in electrolyzers, having a duty standby, or a larger battery storage perhaps upstream of the electrolyzers, and perhaps having a slightly larger amount of renewable energy that feeds into it. So there's things that can be done, and I think it's possible to get around that problem. But you're right to raise it because it was something that came up in the study. Secondly, on the conversion of gas appliances, so there's been a lot of work undertaken by a UK government under a programme called High for Heat, looking at the development of domestic and commercial hydrogen appliances that run on 100% hydrogen. And the upshot is it's perfectly possible to make boilers, hobs and ovens that look the same, essentially, that are safe and operate the same amount of performance as current natural gas or LPG systems. The one issue that we did find is that the way that that work has been going by the UK government is to look at hydrogen ready appliances, which are appliances that are developed with hydrogen in mind. New appliances are developed with hydrogen in mind, but then temporarily backfitted to run on natural gas up until the point of changeover, and then they're very easy to convert to hydrogen. Those hydrogen ready appliances, that development has only focused at the moment on natural gas, and there isn't an equivalent version for LPG. Technically, that's a pretty trivial problem to solve, but at the moment those appliances don't exist for LPG. So if the Stornoway network was converted, it would mean actually replacing the appliances at the point of conversion, which of course has been done previously with the air butane to LPG conversion in the 1990s anyway. And in terms of the factor of costs, the third question, so the details are in the first report in terms of the business case. Just to give you some high level numbers, for the for the gas network just alone, you're looking at actually a factor of between about 4 difference in the cost from current LPG to hydrogen. But that sounds enormous, but I think it should be, as David mentioned, kept in the context that decarbonising heat is a big problem UK-wide. There is no cheap solution for decarbonising heat, and the UK government and the Scottish government have been grappling with this and will be grappling with this for a while. Whether it's electrification, biofuels or hydrogen, they're all significantly more expensive than the current fossil fuel systems, because fuels for heating is a necessity, and so it's the tax is very low, and so it's very hard for those to be carbonised. So but I would say that certain elements of transport, particularly the larger transport, so buses and heavy goods vehicles, within about 5 or so years, in fact some of them even now, are cost comparable in hydrogen to fossil fuels. So that does show that bringing some of these transport applications in hydrogen actually is very credible and a good option to add to the Stornoway gas network for decarbonisation.
Stephen, I now take in Councillor Carol McMillan.
Thank you, Chairman. I was quite shocked at the factor of 4 actually in terms of the cost comparator to carbon fuels. I can see that coming down, and I would, when you look at the complexity of Musmorran or Grangemouth or St Fergus and the size of them, what we are looking at is essentially going back to the 1880s and petroleum cracking. But the real question is how current is it, and how soon, if at all, could we see this being developed as on the ground technology for hydrogen fuel to the Outer Hebrides? That's the question. Thank you.
So I can start with that, David, and then you perhaps come in. But from a technology perspective, the technology is available now. We've both in terms of so we've looked at different types of electrolyzers that could be used to produce the hydrogen, and looked at the scale that they would need to be to meet the demand required, and they are essentially commercial off the shelf available now. So there's in terms of the technology risks, they're actually very low in terms of implementing this. Is there anything else you want to add, David?
No, I think that's yeah, and just to reiterate the point of green hydrogen, that is different. You know, breaking water is different to the cracking route that you mentioned there. And the advantage of green hydrogen is it's going to be more scalable, more modular, and yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Angus McCormack.
Hello, Chair. Can you hear me all right? Yes.
Yes.
Thank you very much. I have 1 or 2 questions. All of them are based on my ignorance of this area. My first question is, how many turbines are we going to require for this particular task to take place? My second question is, if the big wind farms like Lewis Wind Power and so on are going to be involved in this in terms of producing electricity for the hydrogen project, does this in any way impact on the case for the interconnector? Where at the moment my understanding is that we require the 3 main wind farms to export their electricity down the new interconnector. That's my understanding, and I may be completely wrong in that. I'm assuming that in the course of preparing your document, you will have spoken to the community operators who are currently extant in the islands from Barra to Ness in the north. I'd be very interested in knowing how they're going to be involved in this scheme. I would very much like to think that the community operators could be involved at every level of the scheme, that they could be involved in assisting with determining what the best scheme is, and then in supporting the scheme in whatever way they possibly can. And the final question is a more kind of general one in terms of the cost of doing this. And it's maybe something on which you just do not wish to comment. It's probably a political question, but would it be the case that if the amount of profits that the big electricity companies currently make, if these profits were reduced by the nationalisation of the control over energy, would that make this type of going forward in terms of energy production more meaningful?
Thank you, Councillor McCormick. Can I ask David and Stephen to maybe address some of the more technical aspects of the questions there, and can I ask John Cunningham to come in and give us an update regarding the role of the consortium and its membership and so forth. So David and Stephen.
Okay, I can start because just in terms of some of the numbers. So you asked about how big the wind farm would need to be. So we've done initial sizing of both of the electrolyser and how much wind generation we would need to service the demand. Just as ballpark numbers, we deliberately tried not to put any numbers in this presentation to keep it relatively high level, but to service the Stornoway gas network, we're looking at about 10 megawatts of electricity. If you start including transportation, then you're looking at just over 20 megawatts, and if you start including the ferries, then you're looking at about 60 megawatts or so. The key point is those numbers are significantly lower than the potential generation in the Outer Hebrides, and really for that reason it doesn't actually compromise the work going on separately on the interconnector. So that's the first question. Just in terms of the community generators, so the emphasis in this project has been more on the centralised system, but we have spoken to the community generators as part of the study, and as David mentioned, one of the key benefits of green hydrogen is that it's a modular system. It can be very small and it can be ramped up in size to make much larger systems, and in that respect actually it's very suited to the hub and spoke model. So there's no reason why what we've been looking at here couldn't be replicated around the islands and in the smaller scale. Shall I pass it to John at that point?
Do you want to come in and address some of the other issues raised there?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. On the capacity of the commercial wind farms, these wind farms are all contracted to grid for a total of around 420 megawatts, and we don't see that changing. What might happen here is that constrained generation may go into hydrogen, but they are contracted to grid for a specific amount of generation, and we don't expect that to change. On the role of the community, the project's being developed by a consortium, including the Comhairle, the Stornoway Trust, the Stornoway Port Authority, the Community Energy Scotland and Lewis Castle College. So there's quite a bit of community involvement in there already. But we'd obviously want to maximise community ownership as the scheme goes forward, as far as we can within the scope of what the community can do. So this is obviously, as David said, it's a large national scale project, but as far as we can, we'd like to build in as much community ownership as we can. I think that's all I'd have to say on that, Chair, but happy to take any questions.
Very good, John. Thanks very much. Councillor Gordon Murray, and then Councillor.
Chair, could I get a wee bit more clarification on that last point, please? There is at the moment no involvement of any of the community generators in the consortium, which I think is disappointing, to be honest, I must say. I don't understand why you don't have people who are actually producing electricity in the Western Isles not involved in this particular project. I just don't understand that. And please don't tell me again that Community Energy Scotland represent these companies, because Community Energy Scotland will only represent these companies if they are asked so to do on specific issues. I mean, the last time I raised this matter at the last committee, Mr. Cunningham, you said you were considering how best to involve the local community operators. That was my understanding. But it doesn't appear to me that things have moved on very much since then.
Chair, if I can respond to that. As I said, the project was developed by this consortium. I've outlined the membership of the consortium. Going forward, we've secured £11 million from the Islands deal, and the Islands deal has presented us with a very specific management structure, which David mentioned there. And there'll be a two-tier management structure. There'll be an overall board level, and there'll be an operational level, and it'll be for the Comhairle to populate that structure going forward. And as Councillor McCormack said, we did say at the last meeting that we'd look to include the community as far as we can in that new structure as the project rolls out. The consortium's effectively at an end now, and we have to move into a new structure in the very near future.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Cunningham. Councillor Gordon Murray.
Thank you and good afternoon, Chair, and thanks to David and Stephen for a very interesting presentation. Thanks very much. It's a very exciting and positive project, and it's great to see things moving quickly. I wanted to ask, it was basically on the consortium that Mr. Cunningham was discussing. I think it's such an important project that it would be good if councillors and this committee were kept informed on how it's going. So could I suggest to Mr. Cunningham and to yourself, Chair, that maybe this committee or the full council get quarterly progress reports and possibly minutes of the meetings, of course excluding any commercially sensitive information, just so that members are kept really up to date and are able to tell their constituents about this great project, reports on funding, figures and outcomes, etc. Do you think that's a reasonable request?
Well, Mr. Murray, thanks. I think the committee's been very well informed on the progress of the work of the consortium up until now, and will continue to do so as it moves to a new governance phase with a new board being constituted, and I'm sure the committee will be kept up to date with the deliberations of that governance arrangement going forward. Councillor Carl McLean.
Thanks, Chair. I'm not on your committee, but I'd like to first of all thank John Cunningham from getting this to this stage, and thank both David and Stephen for the presentation. I've looked into a wee bit of this hydrogen. I'm not saying I'm an expert at all. I'm not expert on nothing, but this is an excellent project, and it fills us with a great deal of optimism. And having even this report before us today that we've got here, this presentation, I should say, is very encouraging, and we should be all behind what John Cunningham is doing, and well done to him. I'd like to ask one or two things of David and Stephen. First of all, the infrastructure that was here at present, the one thing good, as I read it, the infrastructure for the town gas could be used for the hydrogen. That's the first thing, if I'm correct in saying that. The second thing is the government in 2025 moving to a phased approach to getting rid of carbon? Because if they are, as I read it, the boilers that are presently, the burners that are presently used, especially if they're a modern type, are able to accommodate a mixture of hydrogen and gas. Is that correct?
Stephen.
So thank you very much for those questions. In terms of the infrastructure that's currently there and how suitable that is for hydrogen, yes, the based on what we found, we believe a majority of it will be suitable for hydrogen. So this is the distribution network and potentially also the domestic piping within houses. There is actually still quite a bit of ongoing work by the health and safety laboratories that have been looking at different types of piping and investigating the suitability of that for hydrogen. So we can't say categorically at the moment, but it's looking quite positive, and the general impression across the UK wide actually is most of the gas pipe work should be suitable for hydrogen. And in terms of the phased approach, so I'm sure you've heard about the plans to stop new builds having traditional gas boilers from, I think, 2025 or so. You mentioned about 20% there. You're absolutely right. So existing natural gas equipment, and I believe the same applies to LPG, but it's certainly for natural gas, can essentially run on 20% hydrogen without a problem. And that's so you can blend 20% hydrogen to your natural gas, and that has been trialled in Kiel as a project called the High Deploy project. And I believe that's going very successfully. The issues there are not really technical because gas appliances are already tested at 20% hydrogen anyway before they're installed. The issue about applying that more broadly is just demonstrating that it's safe, looking at the safety case and showing that. But technically there's minimal risk there.
Thanks for that, and again thanks for your presentation today. But thanks very much, John Cunningham, for bringing it to this stage.
Thanks, Councillor McLean. And I think we'll wrap it up there with a good Eilean, and I want to take this opportunity on behalf of the committee to thank David and Stephen for their presentation, and it's really been very informative, and again it does, as has been said, fill us with a lot of optimism about the future and what can be done with our resources. So please, on behalf of the committee, thank you again for your presentation. I thank you, John, too, for, as we've heard, for bringing the consortium to this juncture. So with that in mind, we're looking for the committee's approval for the recommendations of 3.1 of the report. Thank you very much. Now we'll move on now to item 4. It's a performance management, and it's for 2021 Q4. The report is for noting provides an overview of the Communities Department's business plan and related performance for economic development and planning at Q4 year end. And Joe McPhee is here to take us through the report. Mr. McPhee.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. The report, as you say, begins in terms of this committee at 6.2. The Heritage Service activities have been largely in the last quarter continuing to deliver as much heritage activity through various social media, the digital engagement, Heritage Officer Post and the Sohonichtje project. The team have also been very actively involved in the Great Place project, and that's coming up later in the agenda, and also very actively involved in supporting the various community organisations looking to take advantage of UK government funding through the Community Renewal Fund. So a range of activities across the Heritage team. Delighted to update you to tell you that the Lewis Castle Museum is now open and extremely busy, and we're looking to make arrangements for the museum at Linneclet as soon as possible. In terms of planning, development management, development planning and building standards, in terms of development management, high level of pre-application inquiries and actual applications. We have a new planning officer starting in August, so that will bring the current team up to almost full strength, and just a whole range of activity in relation to general advice on planning matters. In terms of the development planning team, there are reports later on the agenda regarding supplementary guidance, and the team have continued to be involved in legislation and guidance in relation to the new Planning Act, and the indicative regional spatial strategy. Building standards, all actions are on target, and activity continues there, almost back to previous levels. Business Gateway, as you can see from the report, very significant number of inquiries in this quarter, 305, bringing the total number of inquiries in the year to over 1,000, which is a remarkable number compared to what we would normally get, which is annually around about 300 inquiries. And that's been a feature, I think, even since lockdown, as we've noted before. The team have been involved, of course, over the last period in managing a whole range of Scottish Government schemes. Most of these schemes have now been completed, with a recent scheme following the election for taxis. 64 startups for the year, with 10 of those claimed in Q4. So again, a significant activity under the Business Gateway team. The Leader programme continues to work with the projects, monitoring and supporting the delivery of the projects that were previously supported. That team is in place, as you know, until March 22, and still engaged on a number of matters with the Scottish Government, and the potential for some future Leader type programme. Related, of course, to the Leader programme is the activities of the flag, and seeking to work with the projects that we currently have, the diversification projects, and some of those are noted there. And the Fisheries Development Officer continues to work with the MARPAM project and supporting the food and drink programme, and the particular strand of that under the Islands deal. Under the regeneration team, the team continued to support the RCGF projects from previous rounds to make sure that they are completed as per the contracts. We're currently working on the next round of RCGF, and so officers are incredibly busy finalising the applications for the next round. In terms of economic development, a wide range of activity across the team supporting Islands Deal, Spaceport 1, which is coming up later, of course, on the agenda, the Castle Grounds Regeneration Project, and the Great Place Project, and various activity under tourism and food and drink and arts. In terms of financial performance, at 7.1, you can see the detail across all the services. The overspend in economic development relates to development of Spaceport 1, and in particular in relation to development of the environmental impact assessment, and the consultancy team that's working on the environmental impact assessment. Again, you'll hear more of that later in the report on Spaceport, but quite an incredibly complex project. And there were no complaints in the quarter. I'm happy to take any questions, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McKee, for that very positive update. And as you mentioned, there's some items that you've mentioned that are to be coming up in the agenda anyway. Are there any questions for Mr. McPhee at the moment? No, if not, then we can note, as far as our committee is concerned, the report is there for noting. And I beg your forgiveness, we must return to item 1 of the agenda. I've slipped up. We need to seek approval of the minute for the meeting of the 24th of March 2021. That's for your approval. Thank you. And item 2 is the declaration of interest. Members are asked to declare interest they have on any items on the agenda. It would be helpful if members express why they declare interest in the item concerned, and please do so using the raised hand function. And please ensure the declaration is repeated prior to the relevant item, and you adhere to the protocol as previously indicated. Are there any declarations? Mr. Macmillan.
Thank you, Chairman. I would have to declare an interest as a director of the South Uist Estates, and hopefully the carbon programme will extend to the South Uist Estates and the Southern Isles as well. And you can take that declaration as being preceding the presentation. Thank you.
So that was for item 3 of the agenda.
Yes. The only other item where I might have a declaration of interest and I wouldn't leave the meeting would be the spaceport, where I would be a member of the Planning Applications Board, which would probably be the full Comhairle when it does come. Just for clarity. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Macmillan. And before we proceed to item 5, I want to take this opportunity to congratulate Anne Murray, Strategy Manager, who has been appointed Programme Director for the Islands deal for the 3-year period. So it's a great accolade for Anne and indeed for the Comhairle that she has been appointed to this post, and we wish her well for the 3 years she's been appointed for. Moving now to item 5, and that's the Performance Management 2021 Quarter 4, and this report is for noting provides an overview on a Communities Directed Business Plan and related performance for economic development and planning at Quarter 4. And the Director is going to speak to this report.
Thank you, Chair. The element relevant to the committee begins at section 9 of the report, and that is to do with energy. As you will recall, Chair, it was asked at the last meeting that we provide an energy update for information to the committee. Section 9 therefore covers the Energy Hub, which we've just heard a detailed presentation about. It covers the Scotland leasing round. It covers an update in regard to the interconnectors, both the main HVDC interconnector and the broken distribution connector. It provides a short update on the Uist and Barra Energy Forum and on the Uist Energy Plan. It's there for information, Chairman, but happy to take any questions on any of these elements.
Thank you, Director. Councillor Gordon-Murray.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question. Just looking for an update on the ESCO. Thanks.
I'm sorry?
Just looking for an update on the ESCO, the energy supply company.
I don't think there is an update to provide on the energy supply company. As you know, Chair, we did set up an energy supply company, but market conditions dictated that that company did not succeed. So at the moment, we remain exploring opportunities around potentials for supply of cheap energy into the local markets. So other than that, there isn't an update.
But just there was a reference to it in the Communities and Housing reports, and I didn't want to raise it at that committee. So is it of the understanding now that it's obsolete?
The company that was set up is obsolete, but the concept itself isn't obsolete. So it is a concept we still want to take forward and we still want to develop, but that will be, when the market conditions make it a deliverable prospect, which we don't believe it is at present.
So there's no longer an Outer Hebrides ESCO, just to confirm that.
That's correct, Chair.
There's no company at the moment, but the aspiration remains the same. Calvin Macmillan, please.
Thank you, Chairman. It's to do with item 9.2 and 9.3 and referring or following on from item 3 on the agenda. Is there a timescale in terms of possibly 5 or 10 or possibly even 20 years that we would look to develop what is an outstanding project? Because the only downside that I can see is the cost per unit and that will, I'm sure, come down as technology and economies of scale develop.
I'm going to bring in John Kynham for that question, if that's okay, John.
Thanks, Chair. Just to confirm that our target date for the SGN conversion is around about 2026. So we'd hope to convert the gas network 26, possibly into 27. Behind that, we'll have offshore wind coming forward, possibly with a contribution towards electrolysis from the period 27 to 29. So we'd expect to be up and running at full capacity by 2030. I hope that answers Councillor McMillan's question.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kynham.
Thank you, Mr. Cunningham. If I could add that, Chairman, I hadn't realised that the project was in effect today, and that if we could give it all our support to try and make it happen, I'd be recommend that to the committee. Thank you.
Absolutely, Mr. McMillan. Thank you. Mr. McCormack, and then Mr. Ian, Councillor Ian McNeill.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. I'd like to say thank you very much indeed for this report. It's very useful indeed to have all of this information in relation to these particular developments that the Council's involved with, and it's very positive indeed. And so thank you to the Director for that. I did recently read a document which talked about interconnectors and why they might break. And one of the reasons apparently is if electricity is not running through them at all times. In other words, if there are times when the electricity is switched off, and this allows the different heats, and indeed it allows the interconnector to cool down to a point where it becomes brittle. I wondered if the Director had heard anything of this, and whether in talking with SSEN about our new interconnector, they might have some discussion about SSEN's habit of switching off local community generators for a week at a time. It doesn't seem to me to be a good idea in terms of the interconnector, and I'm talking from a very ignorant position, of course, but I would just wonder, is there any merit in ensuring, for example, that any interconnectors that we might have always have some element of electricity running through them?
Thank you, Angus. Director.
I wouldn't put myself in the place, Chairman, of offering too much technical comment on the brittleness of otherwise of interconnectors, but it's certainly a question we can take forward with SSEN and explore that particular issue with them. It is a cause for concern that SSEN are switching off generators above and beyond their agreed contracted downtime. Each project requires a certain amount of downtime every year, but that should be within the contract. Now, we know from talking to the community generators in particular, and other forms of generators, that SSEN regularly go well beyond the contracted downtime. So there should be compensatory arrangements, and there should be other arrangements in place to assist community generators and other generators with that beyond contract downtime. So that is an issue we are in discussion with SSEN on. In regard to the technicality around always having power flowing, again, that is an issue we can take forward with them and explore with them. But I couldn't really offer any robust comment in regard to that point.
Okay, thank you. We'll pursue those issues with them, Mr. McCormack.
I'm very grateful to the Director for his response. That would be very, very helpful. Very helpful. Thank you.
Councillor McNeill.
Thank you, Chair. My question is regarding the implications as regards HEAPS at 4.1 for the housing, for the HEAPS funding. Could you give me an explanation on that, please, Director?
Oh, sorry, Mr. McNeill, that's part of the report that was at Communities and Housing. can I suggest that you speak perhaps to the director after the meeting or email him, because it's not part of this report.
Okay, I will do that. Thank you, Chair.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Very good. Then the recommendations are three. Insofar as our interests are concerned, the recommendations are for noting for agreeing at 3.1. Thank you. And we now move to item 6. It's a local government benchmarking framework results 2019-20. Report informs the cone of the benchmarking framework 2019-20 results for the Communities Department and seeks approval of the priority areas chosen for service improvement. The service area of relevance to this committee is economic development and planning, with a focus on libraries and heritage, and the director will speak to the report, and Joe is also available to answer any questions.
Thank you, Chairman. As you mentioned, the elements relevant to this committee are economic development and planning, which is at section 7.10 of the report, and appendix 4, which begins at page 27. The elements in regard to economic development cover a range of areas, including museum, the cost per visit, satisfaction with the service, the cost of planning and building standards, planning application times, business startups supported by Business Gateway, investment in tourism, vacancy rates of property, and immediately available employment land. Of these various themes, the cost of planning and building standards, the average time for planning applications, and town vacancy rates are all lower than the national average, and in this case being lower than the national average is a positive. And similarly, number of startups supported, investment in tourism, and availability of employment land and vacancy rates are all higher than the national average, which is again in this context, it's a positive being higher. In regard to museums, the Comhairle spends well above the national average and spends most on museum services in comparison to similar councils. Despite that, the satisfaction rate with museums has fallen over the past period. Given that last point, it is therefore proposed that prioritisation and focus should be afforded to the museum service going forward, and we should target in particular the percentage of adults satisfied with the museums, that should be targeted for performance improvement. Happy to leave it at that, Chair, and myself and Mr. McPhee will be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Director. Are any questions on this item? If not, we will proceed as far as the committee's interests are concerned. The recommendations are 3.1 for your approval and agreement. Thanks very much. We'll move on now to item 7. It's the Outer Hebrides Fisheries Investment Scheme update. The report is for noting and provides an update on the performance of the Outer Hebrides Fisheries Investment Scheme. It also highlights the government's assistance under the Marine Fund Scotland for new entrants looking into first-time vessel ownership, which is a very important development. And it's been a real success story, this scheme, and we've been able to support the industry in this way and supporting and safeguarding up to 44 full-time equivalent jobs across the Western Isles. Pete Middleton is available here to speak to the report and answer any questions.
I was just going to say, Chair, there's just a couple of points to take out of the report, apart from the wide impact that the Fisheries Investment Scheme has had. Obviously, one of the first points is the welcome introduction of Marine Scotland support for first-time owners. Probably 5 potential applications from the Outer Hebrides, given the age limit, which is under 40. So they're being taken forward at the moment. And the second point would be that investment is inextricably linked to the Fisheries Investment Scheme as well. The RBS is very supportive of developing the local fishing industry, and they have their fixed lending criteria. The applicants provide the resources they can, and And also there's processor investment as well. So Macduff shellfish, Barra Atlantic, Callan shellfish can also be involved. But the fisheries investment scheme is quite often the final piece in the jigsaw, enabling projects to go ahead. And if the 5 first-time owner applications proceed, it looks like the revolving loan fund will almost be fully committed. And that's why there's a request in 8.3 for a view to increasing the fund, given the level of activity that it attracts at the moment. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Middleton. Questions? Councillor Alison MacLeod.
Thank you very much, Pete, for that very upbeat report. This has been an excellent scheme over many, many years, and it's brought huge benefits to the fishing community. It's also encouraging to note from the age profile an indication that a lot of young people are interested in fishing and pursuing a fishing career, which is a very positive thing. Just one question you might not be able to answer. Reading through, it refers to fishermen. Are there any fisherwomen involved in the industry, do you know?
Yeah, we've had one come through the fisheries investment scheme down in Barra, I think it was. They were fishing for wrasse for salmon farms.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Middleton. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. Councillor Ian McNeill.
Thank you, Chair. Very good report, Pete. It's good that our fishing indices are going in the right direction, and we're getting the rightful support from the cause and other bodies. Would it be possible to think about top slicing from our Crown Estate funding to add to your pot? After all, it's from the fishing sector that the Crown Estate receives its funding. Is it something that we could look at as a corner?
Hopefully that would be possible, but I think it would be for others to make a decision like that.
Yes, indeed, Mr. Middleton. That'll be entirely up to members to make a decision like that.
Well, can we put something forward to look at something like that? What's the director's opinion on it?
I'm going to bring in the lead up just now for you.
Yeah, and just to say, I think any proposals like that are certainly worth looking at, and certainly it could have a beneficial effect. Anything that's got a beneficial effect across the islands is something that we can consider. And I think Councillor McNeill makes a fair point. So can we ensure that we look into that and come back with some view on it, and allow members to take a view on it too? I'm sure we're due to have a look at the Crown Estate funding very soon. So I'll agree with Councillor McNeill that we'll include that option, and we'll see what members' reaction to it is. So thanks for that suggestion, Ian.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you both for that. So, do members agree to note the report here? Item 7, 3.1. Thank you. Now we move on to the planning section of the agenda. Quite a few items on planning here. Item 8 is the Development Plan Scheme 2021. The report seeks approval of the Chorus Development Plan Scheme for this year, which is a statutory requirement and reviewed and updated annually. And Mary McKeever will speak to the report.
Thank you, Chair. This report sets out the annual statement of development plan activity to deliver and maintain the statutory development plan. In the forthcoming year, we aim to continue to update and review supporting planning policy to underpin the development plan. A key aspect of the current and future work programme will continue to be work related to actions emanating from the 2019 Planning Act, in particular the new regulations and guidance for development planning and those to take forward the new form of local development plan. COVID has and continues to impact on our team and the wider planning service due to staff absence, more protracted stakeholder working and different approaches required for public and community engagement and collaboration. Happy to take any questions though.
Thank you very much, Manny. Any questions? Councillor Alison MacLeod and Councillor Paul Finnegan.
No, Chairman, it's just a legacy hand. I can't seem to get my hand down.
Very good. Mr. Finnegan.
Thanks, Chair. I'm not a member of your committee. I just noticed, I was reading through the plan, and I just noticed that there doesn't seem to be anything about the potential of how we're going to look at dealing with holiday home lets and the situation in Harris, where we're in places like Luscantire, where we're rapidly getting to find that in years to come there'll be no lights on in the winter in Harris in certain areas, and I just wonder why nothing has been put in that, and I'd like to see, really would like to see something, even if we can't change at the moment, that we show some sort of impetus about how we can actually look at solving this problem, even if we have to take it to Scottish Government, which.
Okay.
Aye.
Chair, thank you. Yes, and there is actions that we have been looking at in regard to this. The development plan scheme relates purely to the delivery of the maintenance of the development plan. It's a statutory requirement that we publish this statement. But in relation to work around holiday lets, we have and we have contributed to the consultation on short-term lets. That relates to both licensing and planning requirements for these. Now that's in train with government at the moment. The aspect of licensing has been suspended due to some of the responses that government received, but there is ongoing action around a requirement for any whole properties that are given over to short-term lets will be required to apply for a change of use under the planning system around that, and that will be retrospective for properties up to 10 years back.
Okay, so because I noticed in 2.5 on the report, it's saying that once this is approved, this will direct the work programme for the development plan team, and it's not really stating that any work will be directed towards that aim, and it would be nice to have seen something in the report to actually state that that's actually happening, because obviously Scottish Government are looking at it, and it was in the document yesterday in Community and Housing on the Housing Vision 2040, and it was just good for us to have had something like that in it as well.
But we do have an action around continuing to work from actions that will come out of the 2019 Planning Act, part of which is the short-term lets issue. But there is a broader issue around housing. But the development plan scheme, as I say, relates purely to the development plan and it's the maintenance and updating of that.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Carl McMillan.
Thank you, Chairman. It was just a query, and is there anything in the development plan to take account of the COVID of the last year and probably the year to come to try and stimulate the economy in the islands? Is there any cognizance taken of that to try and stimulate the economy and to use the planning as not as a prescriptive but as a means to stimulate the economy?
Well, we do have a renewal and recovery plan which has been approved by the council. It might not have been incorporated into the development plan at the moment, but I'll let Mary update you on that.
No, I concur with your own comments there, Chair. I mean, planning will work to deliver the corporate objectives of the authority.
Thank you very much. Okay then, members agree with recommendation 3.1. Thank you very much. Now we move on to item 9. It's the Outer Hebrides Development Plan. So it's a supplementary guidance for caravans, huts and temporary buildings. And the report seeks approval of the draft supplementary guidance for formal consultation as part of the statutory Outer Hebrides Local Development Plan. And the draft supplementary guidance is appended to the report. And again, Mary will speak to the report and answer any questions.
Thank you, Chair. Today we are seeking approval of the draft supplementary guidance for caravans, huts and temporary buildings. This would be in due course to replace the current supplementary guidance for caravans and temporary buildings. This, in due course, would form part of the statutory local development plan. We're looking today for approval to take the draft for public consultation. The purpose of supplementary guidance is to provide more detail than might normally be included within the LDP document itself. This guidance was first adopted in an earlier form in 2012, and this but has had minimal review in the intervening period. However, it was a post-adoption action from the current LDP from 2018 to undertake a more comprehensive review of the guidance to ensure alignment with national policy and responsiveness to the local development context. In addition to updating the guidance to reflect new and amended legislation, regulation and policy, there have been a number of key amendments that I'll run through. The first of these is the inclusion of the policy for recreational huts. This is a new consideration for planning introduced by Scottish planning policy following the public campaign to revitalise the hutting culture in Scotland. Provisions for huts was introduced in the LDP in 2018, where a definition was provided along with direction that it must be in keeping with the low impact, ecologically sustainable and affordable ethos of hutting. This SG provides further detail on use, siting, design, materials, access, parking, servicing, landscaping and flooding in relation to huts. Recreational huts are only permitted in outwith settlement areas as set out in the LDP and are only for intermittent recreational use by the owner, and their commercial use for holiday lets is not permitted under this policy. The second key amendment is the revision of the holiday caravans policy to reflect the current increase in the demand for and types of holiday accommodation which fall under this category, in particular pods and touring caravan and camping sites. The aim of the revised policy is to facilitate growth in this sector through sensitive and unobtrusive development without compromise of the amenity and environment. The policies have been amended to provide further detail on siting, design, materials, landscape, flooding, waste disposal and car parking. Thirdly, a number of policies in the supplementary guidance did not reference flood risk and had outdated guidance in this regard. The policies have now been updated in line with SEPA's latest guidance and advice regarding flood risk. The report seeks approval of this draft supplementary guidance for a period of public consultation. Thereafter, we will report back to committee on the consultation process and any revisions to the guidance before seeking adoption as a statutory guidance as part of the development plan in due course. Eilean MacArthur, who led the development of the guidance, and myself are available to take questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mary. Any questions at this stage? If not, the recommendations are 3.1 there for your agreement. Then we move on to item 10, and it's again the Outer Hebrides Development Plan and it's a supplementary guidance for wind energy development. The report seeks approval of the draft supplementary guidance for formal public consultation as part of the statutory Hebrides Local Development Plan, and the guidance is appended to the report. Susan Rabb will introduce the report, and Mary Stephen is also available to answer any questions.
Good afternoon, Chair and Committee. This report, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, carry on.
Hi. This report presents a light touch update to the current supplementary guidance for wind energy development. It is largely to address changes in the external context or other key agencies' policies, to improve readability of the text and the maps, and to update any links. There is also a new section separated out to form distinct policies on repowering and decommissioning. As Mary has already noted, the function of supplementary guidance is to provide more detail than might normally be included in the LDP. In preparing the draft, the development plan team sought views from some key agencies and stakeholders and are now seeking approval of the draft supplementary guidance for wind energy development for formal consultation in summer 2021 as part of the statutory local development plan. The new National Planning Framework 4 incorporating the Scottish planning policy will be laid before Parliament later on this year, with the intent of being adopted in next summer 2022, and we will be undertaking a more substantial revision of the guidance then. However, in the meantime, we wish to refresh and update the Wind Energy SG, and whilst no fundamental changes to the document have been made, it has been amended to reflect changes in the national policy and other guidance regarding onshore wind energy development. And this includes updating web links and improving readability for web screen readers in line with corporate policy. Reflecting changes in the local planning context and national policy since 2018, or improved readability updates include the following. There's been an amendment to the maps. Map 2, which currently contains the spatial framework and other considerations. For additional clarity, we've included an additional map 3. We've separated out these considerations, and map 3 now shows the areas having low landscape capacity for wind turbines and the areas where there are consented turbine developments already. Other changes that we have done include moving the section on radar impact, as this at the time, round about 2018, there were issues with the MOD which we had to address earlier. Also, we've included some information on community generation, and we've included information on national guidance on community benefit. We've updated, as I said earlier, on our repowering policy to reflect recent Scottish Government policy changes, and we've separated out the policy on decommissioning. The report seeks approval of the draft supplementary guidance for a period of public consultation. We will report back to committee on the consultation process and any revisions to the guidance later in the year before seeking adoption as part of our statutory local development plan. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Susan. Do we have any questions at this time? If not, we can move then to agree the recommendation. Councillor McCormack.
Thank you very much, Chair. I was just looking at the map, the first map, I think it is.
Yeah.
The one which shows which areas are acceptable for wind farms and so on.
Yes.
Am I right then in thinking that the lower half of Lewis and the whole of Harris and the north of North Lewis are not suitable for wind farms? Is that what it says?
That's correct, Councillor.
Yeah. And why would that be?
We haven't changed that part of it because part of that is wild land, and also most of the low landscape capacity for wind is in that area.
Mm.
In relation to wind farms, Chair, if I can come in, sorry, the Scottish planning policy sets out that wind farms are not acceptable within national scenic areas, and that's set out in national policy. That's a prescription we have from
okay.
national.
I'm not questioning the map at all. I just have never seen this map before, to my knowledge. And it's
there's no changes to the map other than to separate some of the details out into a second map for just to improve readability. So the spatial strategy is not changing.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Carl McMillan.
Thank you, Chairman. I would follow on from Councillor McCormack. The National Scenic Area idea is a complete nonsense. The whole of the Hebrides and all of the Highlands and the whole of Scotland is a scenic area, and to prevent development and depopulation, or to assist depopulation due to lines in the map, is something that we just have to kick into touch and remove these brown areas off the map, because that is a completely brown idea. Completely unacceptable in my view. and we should seek to change that as a policy, that we remove the economic blight that we have for this so-called scenic area because somebody decides a line in a map. And I would wish that that would be removed, and that we as councillors seek a policy to remove that from what we put forward as the blight on our land style, this idea of a scenic area. And
policy, Mr. McConnell.
I would seek to change that at Corn, or unless it's changed just now with your own agreement, Chairman.
It's national policy. You certainly make representations to the Minister.
Well, I think as a committee and as a council, we should
I'm taking, sorry, Mr. McConnell, I'm taking Susan back in just now.
I was just going to reiterate what you just said, that is part of the Scottish planning policy, that there are to be no wind farms in national scenic areas, and that's in our own national policy.
National policy will be up for public consultation when the new national planning framework, which will incorporate Scottish planning policy, that's due to be laid before Parliament in the autumn for a six-month period, and there will be scope for public consultation on that. Then we cannot change national policy. We can lobby on it in due course as that affords.
Okay, thank you. We'll take that into consideration. Thank you very much. The recommendation 3.1 there for your agreement, and that concludes our items on the local development plan. We now move on to thank you to Susan and Mary and Eilean for the contributions to those reports, and to the planning team too. Item 11 is the Planning Excellence Award finalist, Lady Madison Seminary. And on behalf of the committee, I want to congratulate the planning team on achieving a finalist nomination in the prestigious National Planning Excellence Awards 2021 for Lady Madison Seminary. Whilst not winning the category for heritage and culture, the team must be commended for their efforts in developing this historical building, which has created 6 new affordable homes for rent in the town centre, and anyone who has seen it will see that it's been restored to its former glory, and it's a great piece of work. And Mary's here to speak to the report.
Thank you, Chair. This report has been presented to yourselves and to Communities and Housing yesterday. Very pleased to share with members this nomination for the Planning Excellence Awards and have the role of planning and housing recognised, particularly for this hard to treat building, which ultimately has brought a semi-derelict building back into use and created 6 homes within the town centre. The Planning Excellence Awards is a prestigious national planning award, and we were in a category with some major projects, Liver building and the like. Whilst ultimately we did not win, we are still pleased to be nominated and have this affordable housing project recognised. We hope to circulate a montage of photos from the project once the Building Standards Officer has undertaken his completions inspection of the development. Just a good example of planning, working with housing colleagues and stakeholders and developers ultimately to realise development. The report is for noting. Thank you.
Very good, Mary, and well done again to you and the team. And again, the report is for noting. Item 12 is the Out of Every's Housing Land Audit 2021. The report seeks approval for the audit, which is required by Scottish planning policy to be published every 2 years. And a list of all the sites in the current audit are detailed in the appendix to the report. Last year's report was delayed because of COVID, and Mary is here to speak to the report.
Thank you, Chair. The report we present today in the appendix seeks approval for publication of the 2021 Outer Hebrides Housing Land Audit. The purpose of the Housing Land Audit is to identify a sufficient land supply over a 5-year period from 2021 to 2026 in this case, and also to provide a supply from 2026 onwards. It is, however, a snapshot at a particular moment in time, as an audit is. A total of 508 effective units have been identified, with a further 586 units available, although some of these are subject to constraints. The SHIP, the Strategic Housing Investment Programme, has set out proposals for delivering 226 new homes over the next 5-year period. The audit also identifies a total of 341 housing completions from the period 2016 to 2021. The number of completions continues to decrease. However, the percentage of affordable housing as an element of this has it now increased to 45% of the total house build. A call for sites was issued in December 2020 through writing to stakeholders, developers and landowners, in addition to a public press release. And as a result of that, a number of new additions to the housing land audit have been identified. We will continue to engage with stakeholders and housing colleagues to bring forward new sites across the Outer Hebrides. We have received, if I can bring to members' attention, we have received a late entry request for a site to the HLA from the Golson Trust. They had sent an email to us in January in response to the direct mailing we did to community landowners, but there was a misspell, there was a typo in the email address, and it was only picked up when the committee reports were published. And this, for this, we're seeking an amendment to the report's recommendation. The site references a significant site in Upper Barvis that the Planning Service has had discussions with the Trust on previously. We're minded to include this site in the HLA, but would note it as a constrained site currently until it's brought forward further for development. Subject to committee's approval, the HLA will be sent to Scottish Ministers and an online version, including a navigable map and further site details published online through the Story Map platform. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mary. Any questions on that at the moment? If not, we'll take into account the recommendations that late entry and recommend that the Comhairle approve the Outer Hebrides House and Land Audit 2021 appendix report and authorise the Director of Communities to include additional appropriately assessed late submissions. And that's for your agreement there. Thanks very much.
Chair, could I just raise a point, Chair?
Yes.
Thank you very much. I have no problem with the report at all, but in Stornoway Jess, and to be consistent with what I said at Communities and Housing, there is nothing at all in Stornoway Jess at the moment which allows for town centre housing, and I'm talking here about right in the town centre. I'm talking about, Cromwell Street, Kenneth Street, South Beach Street, that type of area. And I wondered if it could be considered for inclusion in this particular document. If not now, then at some point in the future. Thank you very much.
Mary, do you want to?
As I say, this is an audit process. In other authorities, developers are lining up to have sites identified within the housing law and audit. The situation, the context here is much more different. We're actually having to pursue sites and identify credible, effective sites. So we can't generate them in a way, it's for the market to an extent to generate them. But if there is sites that members are aware of that could form part of the effective or even constrained with, subject to being brought forward sites, we would welcome that.
As I've just said, yes,
I beg your pardon, Chair. I'm thinking in terms of, as I mentioned at Communities and Housing, there are substantial buildings in Stornoway Town Centre that have been acquired by individuals or companies. We don't know what they want to do with them, but I'm rather hoping that some of them at least will want to develop them for housing purposes, possibly flats, I don't know, but it would be nice to know that that was going to happen and what sort of timescale, and is there any way in which the council could help?
Well, I don't know if we can intervene in people's personal plans for developing their own properties, but like the new recommendation outlines, if there are any additional submissions, the director has authority to include them on the audit list.
a kind of function, if I can come into it, around the housing land audit is to identify, we can include sites that have consent for development. I'm thinking, for example, one that we could take forward in the HLE is the Murdo McLean site, which is consented for development of accommodation. The audit is across all tenures of development, so that would certainly be one item within the town centre we can pick up.
Okay, thank you, Mary. Councillor McMillan.
Thank you, Chairman. I think Mary's got all the questions this afternoon. I see in South Uist we have, I think it's just the one in Garnamonian where we have a single site for development, and a few others have ones and twos. Whereas in Stornoway we're up to about 170, 120, 100 and whatever. But Uist, and to a great extent also Barra, is characterised by all the land being in crofting tenure, whether in by or in common grazing. And I've been approached as a director of the estate as to what the estate policy would be, and I said that we would be as facilitative as possible, and where crofters have land in by, which is they would decroft or outrun common grazing or apportionments, which would need resumption into landlord ownership and then conveyed to the person with the apportioned area of grazing or who would seek the land in the outrun. Is it possible to have a more positive approach so that a single unit, and they would be all single units generally, or maybe within half a mile another one, so that it is consistent with the development pattern that you see in Uist? Is it possible to have a more proactive, facilitative approach in the planning like this? Because they generally don't come to the fore until they're at the point of seeking full planning. It's just the nature of the way of things and the way of finance the world and opportunity. Is it possible to say as a policy that we would seek to be facilitative to people wanting to build houses, settlements, buyers, sheds and everything, which encompasses what you might call the development of the family home, which they would probably hopefully stay for generations? That's possibly a change in policy. But
okay, that's it. I'll take Mary and now Mr. McMillan.
Yeah, absolutely. Concur with Councillor McMillan there around, the need to recognise that, there's distinctive development, settlement patterns and development context. And the objective of the housing land audit is to address all housing tenures, so individual self-builds as well. Certainly, whilst we didn't have a response specifically from Storris, we are aware of activities that they are looking to take forward around single plots and smaller scale developments. Be happy to take cognizance of that. Absolutely.
Thank you, Mary. Recommendations in 3.1 are revised to take account of that latest entry for the audit list. Thank you. Item 13. Thank you to Mary and the planning team again for all those reports. Item 13 is the County State Scotland Local Asset Management Pilot. The report seeks authorisation to progress this pilot in partnership with the Gosney Estate in phased implementation with a view to ultimate transfer of asset management powers. This is a good news story and an important part of the process in securing full leasing powers. Members should note that this is separate to the net revenue strand, which has seen £4 million come into back to the corner over the past 2 years. And John Cunningham will speak to this report.
Thanks, Chair. In addition to your introduction, just to say that this reflects a growing relationship with Crown Estate Scotland. We've come a long way with them through this process, and this is seeking to build in more local decision making in the leasing process. So as you say, revenues is a separate issue that's being taken care of at the moment. This is to do with leasing and having more local decision making through a local advisory group and a panel of members determining leases. It will be a soft launch, maybe for a 1-year transition period, but we're looking, as you say, for authorization to move this forward to a launch and then to full transfer of asset management powers. But happy to take any questions, Chair.
Any questions, John, on that item? Thank you, John, and to the late President on your shoulder. Yeah. Mr. McMillan.
Thank you, Chair. Before you close the item, is it possible to extend these sorts of pilots to other areas? It'll probably come to no surprise as to which areas I'd have in mind, but so that in the future we look to extend this right across the islands.
I would think that was the purpose of a pilot, with a view to being rolled out to other areas. Mr. Cunningham?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. The only expression of interest we got at the time was from Galston Estates, so it's going forward as a partnership, and it's modelled really on Galston taking responsibility for their own sea area, and then the corner is really a placeholder for other communities. So we'll take on responsibility for the remaining sea area, but with aspirations that other communities, as Mr. McMillan suggested, will come forward and take over management in due course. So we'd expect ultimately for most of the Western Isles to be covered by sort of self-governing communities in terms of Crown Estate leasing.
Thank you, John. Okay then, recommendation 3.1 there for your agreement. Moving now on to heritage. Item 40 is the Great Place Project Dochas Divergent Strategy and Action Plan. This report seeks approval of the Great Place Project Dochas Divergent Strategy and Action Plan, and the work continues with project partners to implement the governance structure to lead, manage and deliver the action plan. And a very important project partner for the strategy is Comhairle Inishtigao, the Heritage Forum. It was established to support the advancement of heritage organisations across the Outer Hebrides, researching, recording and sharing the rich heritage of the Outer Hebrides of Scotland. It also aims to promote the rich Gaelic language, culture and heritage of the islands. The organisation would like to encourage and support partnership and cooperation between organisations, local and national, to achieve those aims. The Forum welcomed the establishment of the Great Place Scheme project. We had a very good meeting with them at the last Sustainable Development MAUG, which aimed to enable cultural and heritage organisations to make a step change in how they work together with other organisations in other sectors, in order that arts, culture and heritage contribute more to meeting local social and economic objectives. The Heritage Forum welcomes the priorities for heritage which have been identified by the Great Place Project, and thanks those involved who have had to conduct this research, consultation, strategy development during the difficult COVID-19 period. And the Forum looks forward to the implementation of the priorities identified in the strategy. So that's very positive comments there from the Heritage Forum. We will be crucial partners going forward in implementing the strategy. And Joe's here to speak to the report.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And we should acknowledge the role of the Forum in chairing the project steering group, and in particular Annie McSween, who's the chair of the Heritage Forum. So this is the result of what's been quite a long and complex and challenging project to set out in detail a vision for heritage activity for the next 10 years and set out a range of key actions that the heritage sector in its widest sense could support and get behind. And what we have, I think, is a robust strategy with a lot of detail and a realistic action plan which we will take forward over the next period. The critical elements of the strategy are outlined in the report. The key themes that have emerged from the process are all set out there. 5.9 sets out the kind of strategic priorities in terms of young people, heritage programme, network community heritage, people, place and land, skills and education, academia, infrastructure, social entrepreneurship. we're very thankful to all the stakeholders, and there's been a very wide range of stakeholders engaging in this, including some national stakeholders, and we'll continue our engagement with them. And I hope chairs seek their endorsement in terms of their continued role, and they've already indicated their commitment to supporting the ongoing work of the project steering group. The report really sets out the process. It sets out some of the challenges. Those challenges are around resourcing, and that won't come as a surprise following the very positive MAUG meeting we had, both in terms of the Heritage Forum and also in terms of our own heritage service. And discussions are ongoing in terms of resourcing. We're also working on a pilot project that's emerged from the discussions, Hebridean Homecoming 2023. We will be taking another report to this committee in September on this, but work has already begun to look at what's required to mark this heritage themed year and the centenary of the Metagama and the Marloch. And I know a number of the Comhairle are already starting doing some work on that. But there's also additional work going on with the subgroups of the main steering group. In addition to the homecoming, there's income generation and sustainability. The heritage team I referred to earlier are also working with a number of community heritage projects, and we've submitted a bid under Community Renewal Fund, which is seeking feasibility funding to support the further development of these projects. And I think, as I've said before, I've really seen such activity in the heritage sector and some really exciting projects emerging across the islands. So the strategy is there in the appendix with the action plan. It's a sort of draft final strategy. I've already picked up a number of things that we need to just do some final checks on. We hope to translate it and then publish it so that there's an English and a Gaelic version. But we're seeking, as per the recommendation, the approval of the Comhairle, and then to work with project partners to implement a governance structure to lead, manage and deliver the Great Place Strategy Action Plan. On the governance, HIE have funded a piece of work currently. There's a meeting of the project steering group on Friday morning to agree a governance structure, and from what I can see from the consultant who's leading that piece of work, there's general agreement on the direction of travel in terms of the ongoing governance arrangements for the delivery of the action plan. And as we know, Chair, that's going to be the critical matter here in terms of being able to deliver on these actions. Happy to take any questions from members.
Thank you, Joe. Councillor McCormack.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, Joe. I'm very supportive of this project, and I would like very much that it should succeed. What I'm wondering is the crucial question, are we able to hold on to the staff that we have, and are we going to be in a position to increase the staff? Because I think that is fundamental to taking the project forward.
Joe.
Oops. Yes, thanks, Chair. I think we've got a steady staff complement currently. As members know, it's been very challenging over the last period with the level of savings that we've had to make across economic development and planning, and that was noted previously in the libraries team. Well, similarly, the heritage team has had significant challenges in that. We're currently looking at the structure of the team, and we may need to think, and we do need to think about perhaps a new model going forward. I think the strategy, one of the critical things of the strategy is that the whole sector needs to pull together to deliver some of these activities, and that there's a sort of a mutual understanding of delivery of these actions. And I think there's been a very positive reaction so far across the sector. It's easier in many cases for sectoral groups within that sector to apply for money for funding for various activities. Mm-hmm. Having said that, we are very grateful for Museums and Galleries Scotland, who are currently funding 2 of our project activities, as I mentioned in the performance report, the digital engagement and the Sonecture project. And one of the activities we're particularly keen on following through and resourcing is in terms of museum storage activity. So there's a number of things that we're doing. The model does need to change, and we have to try to work within the budget that we have. But that's a challenge. It's not going to be easy, but I think I think this is the strategy here sets out, I think, a vision for growth and development. And it's a challenge, but I think it's a challenge that everybody seems to be up for. So that's really about as much as I can say on that resourcing.
Yeah, I know what you're saying, Mr. McPhee. You're in a between a rock and a hard place. I understand that, but I would want to emphasise just how important your staff are to the organisations they work with. The advice that they obtain from staff is hugely beneficial. For example, they point the organisations in the direction of areas where they might obtain funding. Now, the council wouldn't obtain the funding, but these organisations can obtain the funding, and these little pockets of funding are so important to keeping the Comhairle going. I would like also to suggest, if the leader is listening here, I think this is such an important matter that there may be some merit in top slicing a little bit from the Crown Estate in order to make sure that it does actually happen. It would be dreadful if all the work that's gone into this particular project failed because we didn't have sufficient staff to make it work. Thank you.
Well, again, that would be a decision for members to make and to consider. But I would hope that a part of this strategy would be generating revenue as well, you know, in the long term. Of course, our staff would be working in partnership with the Comhairle. I don't know if the leader is there, is he? It's perhaps something you can pick up with the leader later on, Mr. McCormick. Mr. McMillan, do you want to come in? You had a question? Oh, sorry, Mr. Steele was before you.
Thank you. Carry on, Paul.
Okay, thanks, Callum. Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Joe, for the report. Just in relation to 613 at the Hebridean Homecoming 23, and you mentioned there's a report coming in September, and you also mentioned the subgroups that have been established. I'm just wondering who's involved in the subgroups, especially in Newest. And I know we worked on a project that was kind of blighted by COVID. It was proceeding reasonably well last year, actually, and it was to do with actually the Marloch and Homecoming involved local third sector agencies. So just wondering who or if any of them would be involved. Thank you.
Thanks for that. I'm not sure who's directly involved from Used on that subgroup, but I will find out and I can circulate that to you. I'll get the info from the Heritage team. So happy to circulate that.
Mr. McMillan.
Thank you, Chairman. It's a good report, and I commend Mr. McPhee in the Economic Development section for it. And of particular interest to me was page 28, and I think Mr. McPhee mentioned the Marloch and the Metagama, or at least one of them. I think it was the Marloch mentioned. And immigration is a big tragedy, and all of the other items mentioned are to do with people. And unless we have the economic development and drivers, there will be no people. I find it quite poignant that 3 of the projects we're putting forward to the London funding are for to do with St Kilda, but at the same time, the people of St Kilda were neglected by central government all the many years ago. So that's, I think, within the last of the people in St Kilda died recently. I think so. It's almost within living memory, and the truism that the dead don't bury themselves can be added to by the fact that we mustn't let the dead hand of our ancestors stop the living today, those living today. And that's where we have to make sure that we don't prevent current and future economic development by citing what our ancestors did. Because our ancestors, or I certainly would be horrified if anything that I did was used to stop future development of the people who are here occupying the land. And hopefully they'll be here for a very long time, long after I'm forgotten. So that's something that we have to be mindful of. That is it possible to include in this that we are looking to not just have heritage development, but also economic development as part of it, and how we see the future and as we see ourselves.
I think, Mr. McMillan, I think the two are inseparable in terms of heritage development. It's hopefully, and their aim would be that it brings economic development. They go hand in hand, as far as I'm concerned. So I think
not quite, but there's more economic development than heritage development. But we mustn't let the heritage that we have preclude economic development, a bit like the National Scenic Areas wipes out economic development in Harris. There is no point saying that about Harris when we've stopped a huge amount of potential development by having lines and colours on.
Okay, I think you're digressing from the content. I think, Mr. McMillan, you're digressing from the content of the report. Thank you very much. Now, any other questions before we move to the recommendations at 3.1? No, recommendations are at 3.1. And thanks again, Mr. McPhee and the team for the work on this report. Here now to item 15. It's the Business Gateway Services and the COVID-19 and Performance Update 2021, which was referred to in the Performance Management Update earlier on. And the team must be commended for the tremendous amount of work they've undertaken delivering the various government financial support packages to the community over the past year. And the report provides a comprehensive details on all these. And I think it's Norman McLean is here to speak to the report.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, as you say, it's a fairly detailed report. Over the past year, we paid out almost £21 million of COVID funding to businesses across the islands. In addition to that, economic conditions have been very challenging. However, we have had some very encouraging results in terms of business startups and jobs supported. So today we're kind of seeking agreement to utilise the balance of funds from the COVID local business support scheme to develop a business recovery scheme. Happy to try and answer any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Gordon Murray.
Thanks, Chair. Just to reiterate the comments about the Business Gateway team, I'd like to say well done. That your performances over the very difficult and challenging times was excellent. So on behalf of the SNP group, just to commend Norman and his staff for the great work they've done, and very busy work dealing with all these applications. So thanks a lot, Norman. Keep up the good work. Well done.
Thank you.
Leader.
I was just going to say that, I mean, I dealt a lot with Norman and his team over the piece, and not only did they do their job really well, but they did with a great degree of flexibility. I think we set out at the start the principle that they should find a reason to give out the money rather than a reason to hold it back, as can sometimes happen in the public sector. And they followed that throughout. And any time that I became involved from some appeal from some business or whatever, they were really, really good. They were flexible. They answered quickly, and they got the money out the door. I know Norman and his team have done a great job and to be congratulated. But at the same time, I know that also Norman and his team were never so happy because they were dishing out money right, left and centre, which they would love to do every year, not just during COVID. But well done anyway.
Indeed, Leader, want to put on record as a committee our thanks to you, Norman, to your team for all the work you've done over the past year. It's been exceptional. Thank you. The recommendations then are 3.1 for our agreement. Thank you. Item 16 is the Swiss Spaceport 1 project. Update. The report provides an update on the progress with this project, specifically the environmental impact assessment and other strands of activity, and seeks agreement on the next steps in terms of securing further investment. And I think Alison is here to speak to the report and answer any questions.
Thank you, Chair. Developing the environmental impact assessment has been far more complex than we originally anticipated, and this is not least because we're developing a unique project designed around emerging technologies. As the statutory consultees have gained a better understanding of the sector, they've come back to us to request additional information and technical detail, both from us as a project team and the various launch operators that we're working with. To give members a feel for the breadth of the EIA, 6.3 outlines some of the work that we've been undertaking over recent times. We've been doing this not just to respond more robustly to the statutory consultees, but also to incorporate learning points from our counterparts in Shetland and Sutherland who are at various stages in the planning process. Undoubtedly, the time taken to do this piece of work has been of frustration, but it's vital to remember that without robust assessments which respond to questions on all elements of launch activity, we could potentially run into delays later on in the future development of the project. We also have to ensure that the facility is fit for purpose well into the future for the range of operators that we're working with. In terms of other strands of activity, things are progressing well. At 6.4, I detailed the two pieces of work that were to be finalised at the time of writing. The Cultural Heritage Assessment is due for completion this week, and we've moved forward quite significantly with Marine Scotland and hope to bottom out on that element of the EIA next week. So happy to take any questions.
Very good, Alison. Thank you for that update. Any questions from members at this time? Okay, if not, insofar as this condition is concerned, the recommendations are 3.1 for your agreement. Thank you. Item 17 is the St Kilda World Heritage Site Management Plan. The report sets out the outcome of recent discussions with the National Trust of Scotland regarding the consultative draft of this plan. The Comhairle welcomes this opportunity and the report seeks approval to support and approve the draft plan appended to the report. And I think Peter Aldwell is here to answer any questions.
Yes, just drawn up by the National Trust for Scotland. It covers the management for up to the next 10 years for St Kilda. And anybody any questions they would like?
Very good. Any questions? Okay, thank you for that, Peter.
Thank you.
A 3.1 for agreement. Item 19 is repopulation zones. And following discussion at the Convention on the Highlands and Islands, the report provides an update on the concept of repopulation zones, which have been explored by the Comhairle working group. There are two appendices to the report which provide further detail on population challenges and the proposed interventions. On behalf of the committee, I must commend the Director for his hard work over the last 2 or 3 years, which has achieved getting this onto the Scottish Government agenda, and he will be chairing the working group taking this forward. So I'll ask the Director to speak to the report and answer any questions.
Thanks, Chair. There's actually 2 elements to the report. I'll take the first one being the Scottish Government's new population strategy, Scotland for the future opportunities and challenges of Scotland's changing population. So that was launched on the 15th of March, and it's a strategy based around 4 key elements. A family-friendly nation, that identifies that Scotland's birth rate is falling, and it looks to ensure that Scotland is a good place to raise a family. It talks about a healthy living society, about the challenges around an ageing population. It talks about Scotland being an attractive and welcoming country, and particularly looks at the challenges of attracting new labour and new skills into the country. And it looks at the ideas around a more balanced population. As we know, rural communities, island communities, and the west of Scotland is showing population decline, while the east of Scotland is showing population growth. So the government is looking to see how they can better balance and redistribute population around Scotland over the next period. Their plan has got 36 actions identified. Some of them have to be fleshed out. They're aspirational at this stage, and a lot of them talk about discussion with local government. So we will be in due course discussing these elements with government. One thing they do mention is that place is important, and place-based interventions are important, which brings us neatly round to the work that's been going on at the Convention of the Highlands and Islands over that last period. So a number of papers have been presented to the Convention talking about population in the Highlands and Islands, and a case has been made that the Convention should be focusing in its efforts and resources on the areas facing the greatest and the acutest challenge. And these areas have been identified as the Outer Hebrides, Argyll and the islands, places in Caithness and Sutherland, and the Clyde Islands, in particular Arran and Cumbria. So the Convention has agreed to focus efforts around these 4 particular areas. They've set up a challenge of establishing a working group to come forward with ideas around what they are referring to as repopulation zones. So that terminology isn't agreed terminology, it's just a working title at the moment, and that may change in due course. So the initial work on repopulation zones has identified 4 areas that they see opportunity to help develop, and these are set out at 5.7 of the report, and they talk about economy and jobs, how new economic activity and new jobs can be created in these areas. It speaks about infrastructure, which incorporates housing and some of the challenges we've been seeing around housing, as well as digital rollout, and it talks about public services and community. So a number of ideas are listed under these headings. They aren't a full set of ideas, but they're ideas that the working group is exploring around with the intention of bringing a further paper back to the Convention of the Highlands and Islands in October. There is further work to be done, and there is work to be done on honing in on exactly what we mean as a zone in each locality. The way thinking is going at the moment is that we would like to see each of these identified locations as coming into the ambit of the zone, and there may be a number of interventions across the zone that will be appropriate for each of these areas. But there may be smaller, more focused areas of attention within each zone where new initiatives and new ideas can be piloted. So I am aware that this work has been going on at the Convention, and we haven't had the opportunity to report to Council the work that is ongoing. So just bringing it to the attention of your committee at the moment, Chair, to let you know that there will be further work ongoing on this agenda over the summer. The housing component meets with the Scottish Government in 2 weeks' time to explore some of the housing issues, and we will bring further reports to the committee in due course as some of the ideas coalesce and become a bit more solid. Happy to take questions on any of that at this stage.
Thank you, Director. Councillor Gordon Murray.
Thank you, Chair. A very, very interesting report. Thank you very much, Director. I just wanted to ask on 5.6, and I think you alluded to it very briefly, that each zone should have the ability to develop approaches and pilot innovation appropriate to their own needs. And I was just wondering what the Director would see as a form of bringing these things forward. I know that the OHCPP had a subgroup on population and economy, but would you see a new forum being formed to try and push these things, encourage and drive innovation? What's his thinking on that?
I'm always wary, Chair, about creating new forums and new administrative structures, because they usually simply add to overlap and duplication. So if we can work within the existing community planning partnership structures, I think that would be best. But I certainly believe there is an opportunity if we identify a particular community and we want to pilot something in that community. It has to be done in partnership with that community, in consultation with that community, on whatever the pilot or whatever the intervention is. It is done in collaboration and agreement with that community. So that follows very much the process or the potentials in the government strategy around place-based interventions. One of the challenges we've had over the past period is that there's one intervention or one strategy for the whole of Scotland. Now, we know just even in the 4 selected areas here, the Outer Hebrides, Caithness and Sutherland, Argyll and the Clyde Islands, that what may work in the Clyde Islands may be completely inappropriate to a community in the Outer Hebrides. So I think we just have to be a bit more thoughtful and try and bring interventions into play that work for a particular very local place-based community.
Chair, can I come back on that?
Okay.
Thanks very much, Director, for that good response, and I acknowledge what you're saying about forming a new fora and committees, etc. So hopefully that this committee would have a good input into these innovations and pilot schemes. But again, great work, and it's a good direction of travel, so thanks very much. Cheers.
Thank you. Councillor McNeill. Councillor McNeill, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry. Thank you, Chair, and a very good report. Very interesting. A lot of interesting kind of topics. With the housing, the jobs, and the economy and the land and all that. We in Ewson Barra at the moment have got plenty of jobs, but we don't have the people to fill the jobs, and it seems to be a similar case in Barra, from our fish processors, from our fish farms, builders, contractors, hotels and hospitality in particular. Have got a lot of unfilled vacancies. If you're looking for a pilot area, I think you should seriously look at Euston Barra, and as part of that pilot, could we look at putting something in place to repopulate the islands and to recruit economically active people in some form or other to fill these jobs and the houses that we hope to be building to keep, you know, we have got positives coming off. We've got the spaceport that's going to attract work, but at the moment we already have a lot of infill jobs. So I would seriously think about Euston Barra, and if the pilot needs any money, we could look at top slicing Crown Estate as an original idea.
I already bid there from Councillor McNeill for a pilot. When are you considering pilot areas?
What the actual pilots are going to be, Chair, and exactly how they're going to be rolled out hasn't been decided yet. You know, I think there will be opportunities to identify locations within the Outer Hebrides that are appropriate. Certainly Euston Barra, I think, would be appropriate for some of the work that we want to do here. And as Mr. McNeill said, you know, this is all about, you know, repopulation and incoming population. So we, you know, and how we, you know, reach out to the diaspora and get, you know, young people from the area back into communities. So there will be a set of opportunities that will work for the whole area, but there will be other opportunities that we'll look to take forward within particular localities. So, you know, I wouldn't rule anywhere in the Outer Hebrides out, but, you know, there may be particular resonance to do things in Euston Barra.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McMillan and then Councillor Steele.
Thank you, Chairman. I would echo what Councillor McNeill said there, and if I would direct you to page 20 of Appendix 1, and it's quite a sobering report where we have all of these areas showing depopulation. And if we could have a version of what was proposed to Comhairle 2 years ago at budget setting of having simplified planning zones or something along that, so that there is less red tape to deal with when people want to try and go and do. Economic viability is the problem here, or the lack of it rather. And it's easy enough to stop things, kill it off, but trying to make things happen is very, very difficult. And it's therefore, I would recommend as a pilot scheme used in Barra to try and do that, and as a first kick-off to remove the national scenic area constraints as a measure of doing that. But,
I have to commend you, Mr. McMillan, for your second attempt to shoehorn that into a contribution.
Yes, I would even recommend that the committee and yourself as chair would send a letter to the appropriate minister and give them a good going over about how their lines on the map are affecting economic development and population viability. Thank you.
Thank you.
You need to speak to your Harris councillors first.
Mr. Steele.
Thank you, Chair. Not a member of your committee. Councillor McMillan's asked me to mention the national scenic areas. I'm only joking. So.
The next person who mentions that has been ejected from the meeting.
Just to say thank you to the director for the report. I think it's a really important piece of work that's going to be coming up over the next few while. It's quite, like Callum mentioned, it's quite sobering to look at the Eriskay and South End and South Uist area. You know, it's huge population decline, and in terms of, you know, the things that you put in place, you're talking about digital connectivity, it's there. If you're talking about putting jobs in, they're there, but the people aren't. So, you know, there's a serious bit of work needs to be done on trying to get the people back. Interestingly, the previous report that mentioned the Hebridean homecoming, it's, you know, the diaspora, if we can get some of them to come back to live in the islands, I think that's going to solve a lot of our problems in terms of the demographics, etc. One thing that I might suggest, and I mean, I agree with Councillor McNeill about the pilot area, but this probably fits Western Isles wide, like a jobs portal that's kind of for the Western Isles, where people know, like a one-stop shop where they can all go to. I don't think there is such a thing, and if that's something that can be developed through this scheme, I think it would be beneficial. Like I say, we've got the jobs, we just haven't got the people, so it's a way of attracting them over here. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Mr. Steele. That's a good idea. But I would hope that our renewal and recovery plan, as well, at the very heart of it is trying to repopulate our islands and create jobs. Do you want to summarise, Director, and the comments?
All I would say in summary, Chair, is that this is a work in progress. It's a work in development. So, there is still going to be quite a lot of work having to be done and quite a lot of thinking to be done to get to the pilots and to get to the zones. I think we're in a better place than we've been for a long time, given that the government now see population as being important. And they have their own strategy in place. So I think that gives us a strategic, baseline to go forward on. I don't want to mention national scenic areas, but I think it is worth saying that we have spent, and I've met any number of ministers over the years making the case that some of these national designations should be removed for the purposes of economic development and for the purposes of regeneration. Until there is an appetite to remove some of these national designations, we are, frankly, stuck with them. So that has to be removed at national level, and we continue to make the case around the removal of designations of various different types to facilitate development opportunity.
Very good, thank you for that, Director. And Mr. Mackay, used.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. Just following on a bit from what Paul and what Councillor McNeill was saying there, we do have a lot of activity in the islands. We've got plenty of jobs, but really we do need the housing to attract the families back, and also we need to fill the skills shortages. We've got an ageing workforce, so I mean, what we need to really start doing is looking a lot more at apprenticeships and giving people the opportunities to learn the jobs that we need to fill. We need to have a way of introducing people into, or giving the opportunity, I should say, to the younger people to learn the trades, the traditional trades, something that's now really going out of the islands. I mean, we have to invest in the infrastructure first and foremost. We need to get the housing in to allow the people to be able to stay in the islands. If they can't stay, they can't learn. If they can't learn, we're not going to have the skill sets. So it's a bit of it's an ever increasing circle really, and we need to try and bring that back to the islands. We always had, really good opportunities for people to learn trades in the islands, and it's something that I think is starting to it's not there now, and it's something that needs to be brought back.
Thank you, Mr. Mackay. It's a challenge that we all share for your area and for the whole of the Western Isles, absolutely. But what do we have any idea what the percentages in terms of new apprenticeships across the Western Isles? Maybe we can find that out. And
I don't have these statistics.
It's something we can look at and see what the stats are regarding that. So recommendations at 3.1 then for your agreement. Item 19 is community wealth building in the Outer Hebrides. The report provides an update around community wealth building. The government identified the Outer Hebrides as one of 6 areas with potential for the development of a strategy, and the proposed action plan is before you for your approval. And the Director is here to lead us through this.
Thanks, Chair. As you said, the Outer Hebrides were identified in the programme for government as one of 5 areas that the government seen as appropriate to develop a community wealth building action plan. They employed an organisation called the Centre for Local Economic Strategies, CLES, to develop the strategies. So CLES have been working with a number of local bodies and community planning partners. They will have interviewed a number of elected members, including yourself, Chair, and the Council Leader, and a number of staff in helping them develop the community wealth building plan. 2.2 of the report outlines what community wealth building is. So it talks about progressive procurement, fair employment, ownership of the economy, socially just use of land and property, and making financial power work for local places. They have developed a draft action plan, which is appended to the report, and overviews some of the areas that they are looking at. Some of these areas are probably more progressive than others, and some of these areas probably offer more opportunity for development than others. So as we go into the implementation of the plan, I think we're going to have to be quite selective in the areas that we look at and take forward. Certainly think there are a set of opportunities around some of the progressive procurement strategy ideas in the document. I think there are some opportunities around some of the housing ideas in the document. Some of you who were at Communities and Housing yesterday would have heard discussion of the Outer Hebrides home ownership scheme, which we've spoken to Cless about, and they were happy to put into the document as a way of potentially opening access to new housing more innovatively and more quickly in the Outer Hebrides. And you'll see a range of potential actions in there around land and housing as well. The document still remains to be finalised. There will be a follow-up meeting with the Scottish Government over the next couple of weeks to begin to get towards a draft final document. But I thought there was value in bringing the document in draft form to committee, just in case there were any comments, to help inform the next meeting with Cless and the Scottish Government. Happy to leave it at that, Chair, but happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Derek. It's an excellent document that captures a lot of the topics and items that we've already discussed today. Are there any comments or questions, members, for the time being? Mr. McMillan.
Thank you, Chairman. I would refer you to page 14 of Appendix 1, where it says that we have a respect and fulfil our rights to live free from discrimination, and I won't mention national scenic areas in that respect, but I will mention the likes of Marine Scotland, who are imposing huge amounts of designations, and Nature.Scot, who are also imposing not just designations, but limitations on doing natural things for agricultural works, such as drainage, in that we can't do drainage in the summer when we can. We've got to wait till winter when we can't. And these are the sorts of nonsensical, absolutely catch-22 nonsense that we get from these national agencies. And while I absolutely agree with all of the recommendations made, I would suggest and even promote that we speak to government about relaxing the petty jobs worth type stop work notifications that are issued by people who know nothing about crofting and farming, and they try and stop the people who do from doing their work. No wonder people leave. And that's what we have to put into this sort of document, that the sort of petty interference from the government, from the Scottish Government and the UK Government, in terms of what they try and stop happening in the townships and the grazings where people can be employed. And all of the diggers in Uist might be unemployed because somebody in SNH has decided you can't do drains until the end of September because of breeding birds. Now, by the top of the year, these birds have gone, but the water has come back. And if you put a digger on any of these areas needing drained, you would lose the digger. It's absolutely nonsense. And what we would have to do is put a caveat in there, is that all of these petty stuff would be removed, because I don't know what it's like in Lewis, but I doubt if it's any different from Uist and Barra. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. So I think as the Director said before, we've put various representations to government on marine and land designations that are thwarting economic development, and we'll continue to do that. absolutely, and I think that captures in all that we've been trying to say and do over many years. Thank you. Recommendations there then at 3.1. And the item number 20 is reports outstanding, and that's been noted. The next scheduled meeting of the
Chair, sorry. Can I just come back on the reports outstanding? There's one, or I think two reports there have been outstanding for 2 years now, and I think there's quite a bit of member interest in the reports. What's the delay? I mean, this is a very important report, I think, from your own and a few members' Faroe Islands visit. What is delaying this report coming to the committee?
The explanation is there from Chief Exec.
Yes, that's as far as this committee's responsibilities are concerned. We did report back on that trip. It's now, I think it's with the Chief Executive to action any further report as a result of that.
So is it the case that the Chief Executive has the report since how long? Sorry.
I don't know, but
it says there he wasn't going to do that until after the Scottish Parliament elections, which are...
Yeah, it's in the report there, Mr. Murray. There, the report. Future meeting of the committee following a members' seminar. Review of the local governance will not proceed any further until after Scottish. That's what it was about. The report was going to be focusing on governance and some of the lessons some of the observations we made of governance arrangements in the Faroe Islands and how they might be implemented here. So I would expect there'll be a report on that, seeing the elections have now concluded. Is that Mr. McNeill?
Thank you, Chair. I was just wanting to ask the same thing as regards to Faroes report. It was one of the best reports that I've seen in my time at the Comhairle, and I would, I'd like to see that some of the recommendations are at least followed through in some way or other.
Absolutely, Mr. McGee, I agree.
One additional thing before you close the meeting.
Okay, thanks very much. Chief Executive.
Thank you, Chair. I'm actually in another meeting, but I was just hearing the discussion, so thank you for letting me in. The report on the Faroese governance arrangements is indeed fascinating, and it forms part of our submission to the review of local governance. But as members are aware, there is no part of it that is implementable for the Comhairle, because government does not allow the same freedoms to local government in Scotland which the Faroese government allows to its municipalities. I mean, it's an extremely good model, and that, I think, was one of the benefits of the visit, was to show what can be done in an integrated public sector environment. So the review of local governance is back on track very much. We believe it will be for government to decide how far that goes, but we are very much basing our ambitions on models such as are in the Faroes and indeed other parts of Scandinavia. So thanks for letting me in. I hope that's of assistance.
Okay, Chief, thanks very much for that. Okay, then the item 20 is for noting now, and the directors wanted to come in.
Just recommend, just very briefly, Chair, just to clarify a comment I made earlier around Hebrides Energy. So Hebrides Energy doesn't exist as a trading entity anymore. One of my colleagues brought to my attention that it remains a registered company, and the directors are still in place. So although it isn't a trading entity, the board still formally exists.
Thanks for that clarification, Director, from an earlier item. Okay. Members and officers, thank you for your attendance today and for your contributions across a wide range of items on our agenda. So thanks very much again, and have a good evening.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.